Hello and welcome back to the Hardwood Hoops podcast. This is episode 55. I'm your host, Liam Horsley. Unfortunately, my co-host, Ben, is still away with work, but I'm delighted to be joined by a new guest for the podcast this week. We're joined by Jordan Foote. Jordan is a NBA and NFL writer / podcaster from the States. So welcome, Jordan. How you doing?
Good, Liam. Thanks a lot for having me on, man. I've been listening to the pod, and I'm really excited to come on, man. It's been a long time coming.
Yeah, I'm really excited. We've got a little bit of chat about the Jazz later, a team kind of neglected a little bit in the UK scene. There's not as many Jazz fans over here, so it'd be nice to get your view on the Jazz. But first of all, I kind of wanted you to talk a little bit about your NBA journey. So you're a Heat fan, is that right?
Yeah. I grew up a Heat fan, and then I started following the Jazz a little bit later once I got into college.
Okay, and what's the Heat link? Is that a LeBron link or family link or?
No, it was a Dwayne Wade link. He was the first player that I grew up watching. So then once LeBron got there, I got accused of being a bandwagon fan. But once LeBron left, I was still rocking with them. So.
Oh, nice. And last season as well in the bubble, you kind of had a good run as well, which is a good thing for Heat fans.
Yeah, absolutely. It kind of was a testament to that team. I mean, they're a hard-nosed defensive team that really had some good players last year. So a little bit of a rough start to this season, but I think a lot of that is just kind of that COVID season, and it's kind of weird.
Yeah, I think I'm a Mavs fan as well, and I think your team and our team have missed some of the most amount of games for players so far. So it's not really a true picture, is it, of how good the teams are with the amount of players they've missed for games?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that at the end of the season, how those teams look will be a lot more important than how they look now in February.
Yeah, so like I said, then you're a Heat fan, but you've started to cover the Jazz. Can you just talk on kind of covering a different team? Because we've got a lot of UK writers over here that tend to cover the team that they follow, and maybe that can be a little bit more biased. So what are your thoughts on covering a team that maybe is not your first team and giving a bit more of an unbiased view? Do you think it's been a positive for your writing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that a challenge is to kind of be unbiased in your writing, but I call it my fan hat and my analyst hat. And because I write for the SI Chiefs, so I definitely have to have both of those. You can kind of be a fan of those teams, but when it comes down to actually going on a podcast or talking about that team on Twitter, writing about them, you have to take that hat off and put your unbiased hat on and kind of look at things that way.
Have you ever attempted to cover the Heat and write a little bit more, or do you go back and read it and think, oh, this sounds a bit more biased or a bit pro D Wade, for example, and you kind of just decide to stay away from it?
I did do a little bit of writing about the Heat, and I kind of was like that, and I think that it was when I first got into journalism school, so we hadn't quite learned about stuff like that yet. So I think if I did it now, I would be okay. But that's down the road. Right now, I'm really focused on covering the Jazz, and it's a pretty good year to cover them, I think.
Yeah, it is. I was going to say that something like 18 wins, isn't it, in the last 19
Yeah.
games? So it's probably the best season possible to cover a team like that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's 19 and 20 now. They got a win last night over Philadelphia, so they are on an absolute roll right now, just playing really good basketball.
Cool. So the plan for the podcast is me and Jordan are going to talk a little bit about some disappointing playoff teams, maybe teams that we kind of had higher expectations on before the season started, and what we do to fix them or maybe improve their record. And then I'll end by asking Jordan 5 Utah Jazz related questions to get your view on them. But before we move on, I just wanted to ask you one question then about the Heat. What are your thoughts on them for the rest of the season? Do they need to make a move? The Bradley Beal move is kind of the rumor that keeps being mentioned over here in the UK. Or do you just see it as when the players get back and the rotation fixes itself, they'll be a playoff team and a contender once again?
I think I'm on the fence about that. I kind of go back and forth. I think that Bradley Beal will help any team, really. I mean, he's such a good player and a good scorer. He's an underrated facilitator, but he comes with a big contract. And the thing with Miami has always been they are a little bit ahead on their timeline. They didn't think that they were going to be contenders until maybe next summer when they had the cap space boom and then the big free agency summer and stuff like that. So I think I'm going to roll with just getting healthy and hoping that the guys gel together and trying to make a run this year, then saving some of that cap space for a big free agent down the road.
Yeah, because you've got a max space as well. Is that next summer or the summer after?
I believe it's next summer.
Yeah, because I know that the Heat and the Mavs are both linked to Victor Oladipo, but I'm not quite
Hmm.
sure with his injury record that he's worth a max deal, in my opinion, anyway.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think that he's rebounded and played pretty well this season, but still, even if he's playing well, I think the term max player is thrown around pretty loosely these days,
Hmm.
and that personally, I would hesitate to give him a max.
Yeah, I agree. Then last kind of Heat related question: Tyler Hero is the player that gets mentioned for trades in terms of all these big stars because you need to throw someone into the package that makes it worth it. Are you on the fence of trading him as part of an asset in the future ever, or you just think he could be that good that you want to build his team around him and Bam and maybe Jimmy as well in his latter years?
Man, that is a great question. Because when the James Harden rumor got brought up, there were so many Heat fans that said, we're not putting Tyler Hero in that deal." And I'm
Yeah,
sitting there
no.
like, Tyler Hero is not going to become a James Harden level player. Like, Tyler Hero might make a few All-Star teams and average like 22 points per game throughout. Like, he could be a pretty good player, but he doesn't have a superstar like world changing top five player ceiling like James Harden has already proven he can be. So preferably keep Hero because I really do like him. And I think he can be like a Devin Booker level player where you're probably top 20, top 25. But in terms of being a full blown superstar, if you can get a player like that, then you might have to part with a guy like Tyler Hero.
Yeah, one of the biggest fan scenes over here in the UK is the Heat, and there's a big Twitter page called Miami Heat UK, and a lot of their
Mhm.
followers didn't want to trade Tyler Hero, and I know that the guy who runs the account, and he was so shocked. He was like, "Why would we not trade Tyler Hero and 2 firsts for James Harden?" He couldn't believe it, but I think it's just fans get attached, don't they, to the people they draft.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially when he has those flashes of being a fantastic player. And I think he could be a fantastic player, but also if it was for Bradley Beal, then I think that people might change their mind a little bit. But with how Harden handled that whole thing in Houston, I think it kind of made people a little hesitant to bring him in.
Yeah, the Tyler Hero famous snarl as well from the bubble probably helped his cause with his Heat fans around the world. I think. Cool. Well, let's move on from the Heat then and talk about some other playoff teams. We'll start with your list, and then we've got two each. Who was your first team that you think maybe have disappointed you a little bit more, and what can we do to try and improve them going through the season?
Liam, I hate to do this to you, but I'm gonna go with your Dallas Mavericks here, man.
Yeah, Jay Rich not worked out as we thought.
Yeah, I like Richardson. He was a guy who, when he was in Miami, I was a little bummed out that they traded him.
Yeah.
But either way, it's kind of one of those, like you said, they've had a lot of players miss with injuries and COVID. Porzingis has not turned back into Porzingis quite yet, which really worries me because he isn't moving as well. He isn't playing as well on defense. I hope that he rebounds to that player because he's still what, like 26 years old, 27.
Yeah, he's 26. Yeah, and just turned as well. And he's
Yeah,
still got
so
3 years left of that deal. So
on one side he's still a young player and can rebound, but also on the other side he's already been injured so often and that contract is really big. So in order for them to take that leap to being a championship team, I think they definitely need Porzingis to be that number two proven playoff option. Like they took the Clippers almost to the edge
yeah.
with Porzingis injured and Luka just going crazy in the playoffs. So I know they're not too far away from being a crazy good team, but they just need to get healthy. And then also Seth Curry, losing him was really big. The 3 point shooting hasn't been where I was hoping it would be because they drafted Tyrell Terry and I thought he would be a decent replacement. But Seth Curry has been playing great ball this year, so I think they also really miss him.
Do you think the reason that Tyrell Terry's not had the impact maybe that us Mavs fans would want is just because of Rick Carlisle being the coach? Because we know he likes to bed people in and he really focuses on defense first, and Tyrell Terry's not blessed as a defender. So do you think that's the reason why he's kind of not playing players like that and he's sticking to the true like tested methods of Corley Stein, Trey Burke, Jalen Brunson?
Yeah, I think that's a huge reason, and I love Jalen Brunson. I was hoping you would bring him up because I think he is a great guy that just kind of you could put him in any situation and he would play good basketball. But man, Tyrell Terry, I like him a lot, and I think he's going to be a valuable role player in the future. But like you said, Carlisle is kind of that old-fashioned type coach where he makes you earn your minutes and play hard-nosed defense and work your way up. And he has a lot of work to do before he can do stuff like that.
Yeah, I completely agree. In terms of what we talk about the Heat, the Mavs are in a similar position with the max cap slot next year. Both teams wanted Giannis, but that's obviously not going to happen now. Is there a trade out there immediately that they can target for this season, or would you be in the same kind of camp as you were with the Heat of waiting and trying to develop and see what happens in free agency?
Yeah, I think definitely wait for them. They're such a young team. It's not like Miami where you have Dragic who's 34, 35, however old. Butler is over 30 now. I guess they have Hero and Bam, so they have some young pieces, but Dallas is just a really young team ready to make that next leap. And I think that Oladipo would be a great complement for Luka because he can handle the ball in the pick and roll really well. That's an underrated part of his game. Like one of the things with Luka, people bring up his 3-point percentage. A big reason why he's not shooting the three ball well is because no one sets him up for any looks. Like he takes all of his looks pulling up by himself. There's no catch and shoot there. So if he could get a player who could kind of take the ball out of his hands from time to time, I think that would help. And they just need a perimeter stopper who can also shoot, like a 3-and-D guy. And I think Oladipo is a good enough shooter to where he would be a good fit, but they'd have to wait until next summer to do that.
Yeah, I think in kind of not a similar vein, but almost slightly worse in terms of his shooting, but in terms of facilitating, Jalen Brunson's almost been that second option. Obviously, we've won 4 of our last 6 games, and they're all games where he's playing crunch time, and he's had a 22.9, I think a 26.9. And a lot of that is because he's playing with Luka down the stretch now. They're not taking him out to put Tim Hardaway back in. They're kind of playing them together in a 2-guard. Do you see that as a short-term solution to play Jalen and Luka together more often?
Yeah, I think so. And Jalen just plays hard. He's not the most blessed athletically. His passing skills aren't absolutely fantastic. Like he doesn't have those go-to star traits, but he is a really good player in his role. And right now his role is to just fit in where they need. And in order for them to get back on track, because like we said at the beginning of the podcast, how these teams look later in the year is way more important than right now. So if Porzingis can kind of snap out of this and get healthier throughout the season and they can load manage him a little bit, Brunson, it's not an ideal situation, I think, where Brunson's like your de facto number 2 option down the stretch, but considering what they have, I think that he makes the most sense for that.
Yeah, I agree. And he's not awful as well on the defensive end. Like I said, he tries hard and plays hard. And for his size, he's relatively good at defending the post. It's just a little bit more of the sort of defensive rotation where he can struggle with. But yeah, I'm a big fan of his, and it's good to see him getting more minutes. The only kind of other Mavs-related rotation question I wanted to ask you is, where do you see KP playing in terms of the team getting the best results? Is he your center, surrounded by maybe a rebounding 4, or is he the 4 and he has to play with like a bigger center? Because I know Rick Carlisle does like to pair him with a bigger center at the moment.
Yeah, I think that you can. That's a tough question. It depends also on how well he's moving and defending down the stretch, because we have seen him be a plus defender in the past, and I think that in order for Dallas to win a lot of games, he needs to be that guy. But also, if you play him at the 5 and you stretch him out to the 3-point line, I guess he's going to do that either way. But if you play him with like Maxi Kleber at the 5 and kind of tinker with the lineups a little bit, then you can still get good floor spacing. But then it's either he's not strong enough against the 5s or he's not quick enough against the 4s. Like it's something that Carlisle will have to figure out, and I'm really glad that I don't have to coach that team this year, because there's a lot of things that he will have to kind of figure out, and he doesn't have a ton of time to do that.
Yeah, the injuries are really causing an issue with that, because I think he'd want to play him at the 4 full time, if I'm honest, but I don't think he can laterally move quick enough at the moment. And I read a statistic the other day, it's something like 31 lower leg injuries since he's been in the NBA, where he's missed time. It's a record for anyone, and obviously he's 7'3", so not ideal. In terms of a Mavs fan as well, we see that Rick likes to pair him a lot with Dwight Powell, and that for us is just not the right move. Like Dwight Powell's not well liked by Mavs fans over here, or I don't think in the States. But I would prefer to play him with Willie Cauley-Stein if you're playing him with any big, but I think that's just my Dwight Powell bias.
Yeah, no, I do like Cauley-Stein. I don't have anything against Dwight Powell personally, but I do agree that Cauley-Stein would probably be a little bit better fit with KP on the floor.
Cool. Well, let's move on to our next team then. I've gone with someone from the East. A bit of a rival with the Heat, actually. I've gone with the Celtics, first of all. They've lost 10 of their last 15 games, 5 of which I think were over 15-point losses as well. So not good for a Brad Stevens team. They were a second favourite over here in terms of the betting odds to be coming out of the Eastern Conference. What are your thoughts on the Celtics? What's gone wrong with them? Is it the loss of Hayward being a little bit more than we thought, and maybe the injuries to Kemba?
Yeah, that's possible. The Kemba injury definitely, at the beginning of the season, you saw really one of the few bright spots for them has been Jaylen Brown just continuously adding to his game. I mean, he has been absolutely fantastic. I was worried that him and Tatum wouldn't be able to coexist and have like the best version of both of them at the same time. And that's really with Jalen blowing up to being a star. That's something I'll still kind of look at moving forward. Like they have Peyton Pritchard who missed time. They have Kemba who's missed time. They're a team that's been banged up this year, and I think Tristan Thompson hasn't been everything they expected this season. And Marcus Smart had that calf strain. They're just a team that's been super banged up, and if they can get everyone back together, I still don't think that they are a top, I guess, 3 team in the East. I mean, it's kind of hard to pick right now, but they don't have that ceiling that I thought they had.
Yeah, that's the issue with them, really. I think everyone saw this high ceiling with having 2 wing players that can guard probably 1 through 4, you'd think, in Tatum and Brown, and then go out and drop 30 on a nightly basis. I think everyone kind of saw them as maybe a second seed in the East. But for me, the floor is also lower with the fact that Kemba just doesn't look like he can play on some nights. And it's hard to see, but the amount of injuries he's had has really limited his production. On the defensive end, he's probably like a Trae Young level 0 at times.
Yeah, no, I was going to bring up, like, you can headhunt him on defense, and especially in the playoffs. Like, people kind of think that the regular season and playoffs are the same game. Like, when you have time to scout just one team throughout a series and the lineups get smaller, Kemba can't play defense. And he's a guy who's always been undersized trying to do that. But at the beginning of his career, he had that mentality to where he could make up for it. And now he can't do it. He just physically cannot. Teams are getting smarter. So it's tough to have him as your point guard down the stretch. He's not a great facilitator. He's not the elite scorer he used to be. So like you said, it is really hard to watch.
Yeah, and when you're coming up with Jeff Teague as your backup as well, you've almost got the same problem. When he's in, teams just target him the same way that they target Kemba. So, yeah, it's tough. And like you said, with Smart out, I think he's missed something like 9 games this season already.
Yep.
And he's there, but he's probably their best defender. I think Tatum's got the ceiling to be the best defender on the team, so is Jaylen Brown. But Marcus Smart's probably the best defender of a guard. And I think with him out, it just exposes Kemba and Teague even more.
Smart is an underrated player. I think he kind of keeps everything together. And his facilitating is underrated. He's not a guy who you need starting and like running your offense, but he's kind of that glue guy that people don't think about and you don't realize you have until it's gone. And I mean, with him injured the past 9 games, like you said, they're really realizing that they need him more than they think.
Yeah, definitely. Another question I had for you, actually, regarding to the Celtics, would be in the summer, obviously the Gordon Hayward news came out and there was rumours for probably a 2-week period about where he would go and what they would get back for him. Apparently the Pacers offered Miles Turner and Doug McDermott for Gordon Hayward. Do you think that the Celtics regret doing that and not doing that trade now with the way that Tristan Thompson's panned out?
I think so, especially with Miles Turner. We'll talk about Defensive Player of the Year later in the show, but he's a guy who is squarely in that conversation right now. And who knows like how it would work with floor spacing. I think Turner has gotten better at stepping out and converting some of those mid-range shots to threes and stuff like that. But I guess you have Tristan, you have Grant Williams, you have Daniel Tice. I mean, Taco Fall. They don't have a ton of star power, needless to say, at the center position. So I think that would have been a very interesting fit, especially when Hayward just goes and plays in Charlotte rather, and is just really thriving with LaMelo Ball. You kind of hate to just see him go for nothing. And he's a guy that the fit there was always kind of questionable alongside Brown and Tatum, but I think that, like you said, they probably regret not pulling the trigger on that move.
Yeah, I do wonder if they regret not trading Kemba if they could over Hayward as well. I know the fit was not great, but at least Hayward can give you some sort of defensive stability guarding threes and fours.
Yeah.
On my notes then, one kind of solution I did have for them, there's a trade package that's going around at the moment. Let's get your opinion on. So Nikola Vujacic from the Magic, he seems to be destined to leave the Magic. He's been there for years and been rumoured in sort of trade rumours for the past 3 or 4 seasons. But for me, I think he'd be a perfect fit, and the Celtics have got that huge trade exception they can kind of offload to make the salaries match. What are your thoughts on Vujacic playing alongside Brown and Tatum?
Yeah, he's a good player. And I was going to bring out that trade exception because it's something that it's a lot easier to talk about using than actually do. But it's such a huge trade exception that they can take on a huge contract, and Vooch is getting a pretty penny from the Magic, and it's something that I don't know exactly what you kind of send back in return, and if it's worth it. But he's a really good player and a guy that I think, because he plays in Orlando, is underrated and kind of overlooked by a lot of people.
Would he be a better fit for this team than if they tried to trade it for Aaron Gordon? Because I know both players seem to be on the block for the Magic. Do you think Vujacic fits a bit better?
Yeah, I think so. Aaron Gordon is a player that I like watching because he's fun, but if I want to build a winning team, he doesn't do a ton of stuff extremely well. He's not a great shooter. He doesn't really play defense. He's injured pretty often. So he's more kind of that box office, I guess, draw as a team, and he never really cashed in on that great potential he had. So I definitely would take Vooch over him, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think Vucic's asking price will be a lot more, but there's been a lot of rumours whether it be Peyton Pritchard, Romeo Langford, and a couple of firsts. But I'm not quite sure. You never know. Danny Ainge is not scared of pulling the trigger on a big trade, I don't think.
Yeah, absolutely. He's something else. He's a very interesting guy.
Yeah, he doesn't care. So in terms of the ceiling of the team, then, if they don't make any trades, which I think they will, but if they don't, do you think a third seed in the East is out of the question, and they'd be battling out with maybe the Heat and the Pacers for a 4-5 seed once again?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you look at the East standings right now, it's Philadelphia, Milwaukee, Brooklyn. I think those will be your top 3 at the end of the season, without something crazy happening. And then you have teams like Indiana and Boston, and then you have like a drop off, and it's Toronto, the Hornets, the Knicks. The Heat obviously will climb up the standings, I think, once everything comes together. Like, I don't think they're going to miss the playoffs in Atlanta. If Atlanta can get healthy, they're going to push for a playoff spot. But Boston, I guess, could be the 4 seed unless something crazy happens to Philly and they drop off. Like, I think them improving would take one of those top 3 teams getting a lot worse throughout the season.
Yeah, and for me, we don't know where else the Nets are going to finish, but I would really want to avoid finishing in 6th or 7th.
Yes.
I don't want to have to go against KD in the first round of the playoffs, especially if I'm Boston. I think it could be bad for them, and then maybe even Brad Stevens could end up leaving, because they've been to the playoffs 4 of the last 5 years and not got out of the East yet. So if I was them, I would be trying to finish 4 or 5 at least, just so you could properly play the Pacers rather than having to go to Brooklyn, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And Stevens, like, do you remember when he first got there and people were comparing him to Greg Popovich? Like, Am I crazy, or do you remember that too?
Yeah, I remember that. And his out of timeout plays were known as like the best ever for about a 2-year period. Then all of a sudden, the reputation slowly kind of subsided a little bit, I think.
Yeah, and he's still a good coach. I mean, don't get me wrong, but there's never going to be another Greg Popovich.
No, well, the other thing is that he gets kind of lauded for defensive rotations, but the last 2 years, the Celtics haven't been as good on the defensive end. Especially, I know this year we kind of attribute a lot to Smart missing games, but they've been awful defensively this year, and that shouldn't happen if you're kind of known as a great coach. Not in my opinion, anyway.
Yeah, well, especially when you have 2 of the better defensive young players in the league guarding the perimeter in Brown and Tatum, and then you have guys like Ojale who can play defense. They have some guys who can and will play defense, but those rotations, like you said, just haven't been as good as they should be.
Cool. So last Celtics question then. On our last podcast, we were talking about the All-Star game, and my co-host Ben, he wanted Jaylen Brown to start for the Eastern Conference. I know that it's not for the East, but as an East starting five member, do you kind of agree with that, or you think that Jaylen Brown's not been to that level to be an All-Star starter this year?
Oh man, that is tough. Like you have, I guess you would consider Brown a guard in that situation because Tatum would be the forward. So you would have guys like, I guess Harden would count in the East. You would have Kyrie,
Yeah, Bradley Beal.
Bradley Beal.
Three.
So, man, and Beal, like Brown is a way better defender. Like it's not even close. But Beal's averaging over 30 points a game again, and I think that. I mean, it's nothing against Jaylen, but I think he would be the third guy in that scenario. That's just me though.
Yeah, I think so. I think they'll be voting between Harden and Kyrie. I think for the starting spot. Yeah. And James Harden's been a lot more of a. So he's getting more like 40 touches a game now, more than Kyrie. He's basically the true point guard, and Kyrie's playing off ball. So I think they'll end up going Harden over Jaylen Brown. But to even be considered up there after where he was 2 years ago, I think Jaylen Brown will be proud, and Celtics fans will be happy with that at least.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's like people were bringing up Jaylen Brown when he came in as a high floor, low ceiling kind of player. And like every year he keeps adding stuff to his game. And this year it's been that mid range shot has been phenomenal. So he's one heck of a talent.
Cool. Well, let's move on to your second disappointing team then. Who have you got on your list?
I've got the Denver Nuggets, and they started off really poorly and have kind of been improving. Like I can see the light at the end of the tunnel for them. But they miss Jeremy Grant a lot, I think. That really perimeter defensive stopper, and he's also getting buckets in Detroit. Like he's been a very good player this year. So they missed that, and then they brought in Campazzo to be like a backup point guard when they already had Monte Morris. So the rotation decisions just have been a little bit weird to me. And then Michael Porter Jr. has missed time. Jamal Murray has been injured. So again, it's one of those teams where I think we'll look at them at the end of the year and things will be okay. But right now they just don't look great.
Yeah, I completely agree. What are your thoughts on Jamal Murray? Because he was known as a bit of a hot and cold player for the last probably 2 seasons. And then across the bubble, he was just hot the whole time. Like, his performance in the bubble was incredible. And it was almost between him and Donovan Mitchell to take the next step. And obviously Mitchell has, but for me, I don't think Murray has. What are your thoughts on him as a player?
Yeah, I agree with you. I do like him. I think that he is a good player, and he's never going to be a good defender. I don't even know if he's going to be a neutral defender, but I think playing with Jokic, it's a blessing and a curse because Jokic will create looks for Murray, but it also robs Murray of the ability to be that true point guard and kind of get those touches and handle the offense. And like their rotation at point guard is deep. They have RJ Hampton as their like number 4 point guard, which is insane because I like RJ a lot and think he'll be a good player. So they're just banged up right now, and I think that they miss Grant and guys like Gary Harris, Will Barton. They just haven't been able to pick up the slack, and they're kind of a team that tried to run things back with the roster they have, and right now it's just not going great for them.
Yeah, their rotation at the moment. So they lost to the Lakers, 122, 105 the other day, and they played 4 guards for quite a considerable amount of time. Even RJ Hampton got 20 minutes off the bench. But they're playing with Jokic, who's almost a guard in terms of how he plays and how he brings the ball up the court. So I think they need a lot more wing depth, which maybe they didn't kind of take into consideration when they let Grant walk. I know they matched his salary, but there was obviously an issue there with Grant's sort of kind of placing the offense. There's rumors that he just didn't have enough shots and he wanted to go to Detroit and play and get more shots. But for me, that's what they missed. They missed someone at 3 or 4 who can actually guard the best player on the other team.
Yes, absolutely. And you look at the guys they have at point guard and center in Murray and Jokic, they don't play good defense. And like Jokic is better than he was. I mean, when he got into the league, he literally didn't play at all. He's still probably at best like a slightly below average defender, and Murray doesn't really play either. So you need several defensive stoppers, like stalwarts around them. And Michael Porter Jr., when he's in that lineup, he's gotten better on defense, but it's kind of like a Jokic thing where he went from absolutely horrible to just okay-ish at that spot. So it's one of those things where they need a bunch of just defensive studs, and right now they don't have that type of rotation.
Do you think they're a prime contender to make a trade? I know we've spoken about him already, but Bradley Beal's a name that's just probably going to go around forever. Blake Griffin is a name now that's popping up. You've got Vucic and Aaron Gordon, like we said before. Or Oubre from the Warriors is another name. Do you think the Nuggets could make a big trade to try and go for it? Because they're in the place now where they've been a top team for 3 seasons, but they haven't quite even got to the finals yet.
Yeah, I think they could. Oubre is a guy who the fit isn't great in Golden State, and he's played better basketball as of late, but I would like to see him. I didn't bring up the Warriors because they're playing better, but I want to see them try to push for a Beal trade, even though they would have to jump through a lot of hoops to make that happen. But Denver would be a team where I think that'd be a good fit. And you have guys like Paul Millsap, where I don't know how much of an upgrade, if at all, Blake Griffin would be over Millsap just because of how his body has betrayed him. Like, we could do an entire podcast about Blake Griffin and how it's kind of sad to watch that happen, kind of like a Kemba Walker type situation. But Denver needs to do something because I just don't know if their ceiling is there right now with the roster they have. They're a fun team. They're a good regular season team, but once they get into the playoffs, I don't really trust them too much.
Yeah, for me, the Nuggets and Warriors are in the exact same place. They're 2 teams that are almost in win-now mode. The Warriors are going to be in win-now mode forever, basically, until Steph retires. But the Nuggets are in a similar position. It's interesting you bring up, actually, the Beal trade. I heard on the Bill Simmons podcast that he also thinks that the Warriors have actually probably got the best package that anyone could offer for Beal if they chuck Wiseman in there and Oubre together. So I'd be interested to see if they can pull that off. Yeah,
absolutely. And with Steph there, like you said, they're going to be in win now mode until Steph retires, just because I think he'll age. Yeah, go ahead.
No, you go. It's fine.
Yeah, no, I think Steph will age really well, and every year I think that if they can keep shooters around him and then like a couple defensive stoppers, they're going to be in that conversation every year.
Yeah, and that's what Beal gives you, I guess, as a guard as well. You wouldn't need Steph to guard the best guard on the other team all the time. You can just leave Beal to guard whoever it is and let Steph kind of be in the corner and just play offense, as bad as it sounds. And between Beal and Draymond, you'd have 2 really good defenders, and then Clay, potentially, if he comes back next year, near his old level defensively, you'd have a really good team there. But I wonder how many firsts it would take to get Bradley Beal to Golden State. I think it would take a few firsts.
Yeah, it would take a lot, and then you'd have to give up Wiseman, who I think that he has a pretty high ceiling. I like him as a player. But 2 things really quick before we move off of that. Mm-hmm. Steph off the ball is insane, which is really weird because he might be a little bit better off the ball than he is on, and he is a fantastic on-ball player. And then also with Beal's defense, like, I think if you take some of the offensive responsibility off of his shoulders, that he would be a passable, solid defender. Like, I think that's the case with a lot of guys where they're just so overworked that they can't play defense. I think that even a guy like Jokic or Luka, like this year, Luka, a lot of guys, it's just a matter of kind of being in shape and putting forth effort. And Luka has played better defense this season just because he's getting rounded back into shape and playing with more intensity on that end. So I think Beal would be kind of falling into that same mold.
Yeah, he's the exact sort of player that has the tools, isn't it, to be a good defender. Unlike someone like a Steph or Trae Young, where you look at them and you're like, oh, they're probably never going to be a great defender. Whereas when you see Bradley Beal, at least he looks like he could be a good defender.
Yep, absolutely.
And if the Nuggets did want to get involved with a trade like that, do you think they're going to have to give up Michael Porter Jr.? And is he too good to give up? Because a lot of people are really high on him, especially that I read in the media over there. I think that people see him as a future star, future all-star.
Yeah. Personally, I don't think he's quite too good to give up, but for the Denver Nuggets, if I'm them, then I'm not giving that guy up, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'd rather give Murray up, and then that's not just because of the contract. I think it's just the player he is as well. And it's harsh on Murray, but I think it's true. I think his ceiling's a lot lower than what Porter Jr.'s could be. Yep. Cool. All right, we'll go on to my next team then. I struggle with this one to think of who to go with. I went with the Raptors just because there's been a lot of rumours about them in for a trade at the moment. Apparently, they've inquired about Andre Drummond from the Cavs. What are your thoughts on the Raptors trying to acquire Drummond? And do you think that he's so expensive that they should not? My opinion is they should just wait because I think he's going to get bought out regardless. But there seems to be rumours that they're picking up and they're trying to do a trade with Cleveland.
Yeah, I completely agree with you in terms of waiting for the buyout market. My only worry would be him ending up in Brooklyn, and
Yeah,
then Toronto would miss out on that. But I mean, you look at their center rotation. Chris Boucher has had a really good. He's like in that sixth man of the year race. They have Aaron Baines, who Baines is a fun player because he's an enigma almost. Like he's kind of like in that Tyler Hero thing where people hype him up a lot.
yeah,
But if you look at him, he's not quite that special. But man, they have 1 through 3, 1 through 4. I like them. They have Anunoby who can play small ball five when needed. They have Fred VanVleet and Kyle Lowry, who I think, where was Lowry rumored to be traded to? Did you see that? I forget what team it was.
yeah. There was a rumor yesterday as well that Lowry was going to get traded. I'm just going to see where it was. I couldn't remember if it was in the West or not.
I think it
Uh,
was a West team.
so apparently your Heat are one of the rumors, and then there's someone in the West.
Oh, it was the Clippers. That's who it was.
Clippers. That's what it was. Yeah,
They need a point guard too. That would be interesting.
he's made his money as well now, so he'd be happy to go
Yeah.
and win. I think.
Yeah, man, that'd be crazy. I didn't even think that he would be available, but wasn't it because like he sold his property
Yeah.
or something like that?
Yeah, he's lived there the whole time since he got his first contract for Toronto. It's something like $5 million place near
Wow.
the training facility, and he sold it now, completely sold it, and hasn't bought anywhere else. So there's a lot of rumors that he wants to get out and just try and win. But he's already won a championship there, so it's hard for me to know what to do. But I think if I was a Raptors fan, I'd be very disappointed because he's probably the best Raptor of all time. You'd say?
Yeah, I like DeMar DeRozan a lot, but
Yeah.
Kyle Lowry's been that guy for a long time. And then Kawhi, people bring up Kawhi. I'm like, Kawhi played there for one season. You can't be. That's like if LeBron won a championship with the Lakers and then bolted. That people would say he's the best Laker of all time. Obviously, they have had a lot more really good players play for them than
Yeah.
the Toronto Raptors. So it's not a bad thing that Lowry's the best player in that franchise's history. It's just that he's been there and he has that kind of legacy impact that a lot of players don't have.
Yeah, like the fifth greatest Raptor ever is someone like Jose Calderon. So it's not quite the same level as it is as the Lakers. If Lowry leaves, then in a trade, is that them just done and that's a rebuild in your eyes? Because Siakam's still young, OG's young. Obviously, they just paid VanVleet, who's still 25, I think 26.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what are your thoughts? Would that just be into rebuild mode, or would they be trying to freshen that up and try and get something back?
Yeah, man, I don't really. Every time I see that trade, I'm like, what sense does it make for Toronto? Like, I know Lowry is an older player and his contract, you don't want to keep paying him a ton of money, maybe, but they would have to get something interesting in return. And to touch on Siakam really quick, like, I like him as a player and I'm really high on him, but I think the NBA has almost figured him out a little bit this season,
Yeah.
where he's not extremely quick against threes and he's not all that strong against fours, to where as long as you can stay in front of him and force him to shoot, because a lot of his points just come off of drives and pick and roll and stuff like that. And he's still a versatile, important player and plays good defense. But the people who said like he had the potential to be a Kawhi level player, like it's just not true. Yeah, it's
No.
just not true, and I don't think he's quite going to be a Kawhi Leonard type player.
Yeah, in one of our NBA UK kind of group chats of all the people that have podcasts over here, there's just a running joke about Siakam's only move is a spin move. It's like It's like Giannis, like half of Giannis. It's like half a spin move, driving to the lane. That's it. And yeah, I think he looked great the year they won the title because of who he was playing with. But now he's arguably option number one, maybe option number two on the team. It's not quite the same. Where do you see him then for a championship team? Is he your third best player if you want to win a title, or could he be your second best player?
I think he's your three. Like it depends on where the other teams go, like your path to the finals. But man, if you look at teams that have those big twos, like a Steph and Clay, a LeBron and AD, even a Luka and Porzingis, like teams that aspire to be championship teams, you would have to make Siakam that third best. Even a team like Atlanta, if they kept Young and Collins together, I think that Siakam might be your third best player on that team. Like it is tough to win a championship with a guy like him as your number two. And that doesn't mean he's a bad player. It just means that in today's NBA, you have to be a stacked team in order to win.
Yeah, and it sounds almost basic to say, but for to be a star on a team, to be like a 1 or 2, normally you have to shoot. And Giannis is probably the exception of that rule to me, and maybe
Yeah.
Ben Simmons. But Siakam really struggles with his outside shooting at times. And I think when people can just sag off you and you haven't got much else, I think that can cause a big problem for him.
Yeah, absolutely. It's once he became the focal point, once teams kind of focused on how to stop him, life comes at you fast in the NBA. Like you can be that one guy who burst onto the scene for a year or two, but once you become the guy and teams start trying to stop you, only the truly great ones are able to kind of fight around that.
Yeah, I completely agree. So the last question I did have on the Raptors was just a note that one of the Raptors fans tweeted in saying was, what are your thoughts on the fact they're having to play away from home at the moment because of the whole Toronto not allowing sports teams from the US coming in? They're playing in Tampa, I think.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? Is that any like impact at all, or is it so minute that they can't really blame that and it's just being used in the media as a kind of scapegoat almost?
I think you can blame like just a little bit. I think that like if the Lakers had to play in Washington or something crazy for the whole year, like it would be one of those things where maybe they're not quite as comfortable at first and guys like LeBron would miss their families and stuff like that. But I don't think you can blame an entire season on it. And just a quick side note, I'm very upset that Kansas City was not the finalist to get the Raptors because we were in the running for a long time, and even Patrick Mahomes tweeted about it. So I thought that once Mahomes tweets about it, like it's a done deal, it's going to happen. But
the
they ended
mayor
up
did
going
as
to
well,
Tampa.
didn't he?
Yes, yeah. So I really thought it was going to happen, and I was going to be excited because I feel like we would allow fans, at least in some capacity, or maybe I could go cover a game or something. But I'm still waiting on KC to get that NBA team.
Yeah, there's been rumours of an expansion, hasn't there? But I just think it'll be Vegas and Seattle, unfortunately,
Yeah.
not Kansas. So I can't time a Chiefs game with a Kansas City, whatever basketball name they come up with, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, that's our sort of playoff roundup then. Why don't we go on to talk about the Jazz? Like I said earlier, this is a team a little bit undercovered, to be honest, in the UK. And me and Ben, who's my co-host, maybe until this season haven't spoke about them enough. In our preseason predictions, we had them 6th, I think, in the West. Maybe Ben had them 7th. So they're outseeding our expectations quite a lot. You're 23-5 at the moment. I think you said they were 19 out of 20. Is that right in the last 20 games?
Yep. Uh-huh.
Yeah, 8 games in a row now, top of the West. So the first question I had was, do you think this shortened off-season and the COVID situation has helped the Jazz at all? Because they've almost run it back in terms of their roster. Everyone's played together before. What are your thoughts on that? Is that a key moment to why they're there?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that you look at that team last year, really Bogdanovich was injured for the playoffs, so getting him back was a huge plus. You're basically signing him as a free agent, like not literally, but you're getting that addition of talent. Mike Conley has played. He showed in the bubble that he was back, and now he's transitioned that and translated it to the season. The only major move they made was swapping out Tony Bradley for Derek Favors as the backup center, and it has worked phenomenally for them. So really keeping that continuity, like you said, has really, I think, been a huge plus for them.
Yeah, Royce O'Neal as well is just another player. I think he's one of the many of the Jazz players that are shooting like 40%, I think, from three. They're just getting points from everywhere. But yeah, I do think that's a key thing. I think in the NBA today, there's a lot made of almost league-wide changes. And we saw in the NFL that a lot of the teams that did well were teams that kind of brought back as many starters as they could from the year before. And I think that's the same with the NBA. And Quinn Schneider as well, he knows these players quite well. So the rotation's almost set in stone before you've started the season, I guess.
Yeah, and really like the only philosophical changes he's made are they're taking even more threes than they were last season. Like last year, they took a lot and were making a lot. This year, they just embraced it. They're like, if we're going to be a three-point shooting team, we're going to be the best damn three-point shooting team in the league. So they that's been a huge difference for them. And I think that you could tell when they lost that first round series last year that guys like Gobert and Mitchell were so upset and they knew that they could be better that they really did work extremely hard. There was an article in The Athletic that I read the other day. They were scrimmaging and practicing like every single day, and everyone knew what they needed to do. the team was staying together and working out together. So I think that they have a chip on their shoulder, and Snyder is a huge reason why that's happening.
Yeah, and on that note of Snyder, on the podcast, we speak about the best coaches in the NBA quite a lot. Me and Ben both are very high on Nick Nurse, which I think a lot of people are. Obviously, I'm biased towards Coach Carlisle, but Quinn Schneider is one that always gets talked about as one of the best. What are your thoughts of how he kind of fits with the Jazz as an organization? And maybe is he slightly overlooked by national media in terms of how good he is as a coach?
Yeah, I think he is. And I would throw Eric Spoelstra into that group as well.
Definitely.
But Quinn is a fantastic coach. And people brought up how he didn't make adjustments in several playoff series, but you have to think about the roster he has. He's never had a championship level roster, and even this one, I'm not sure it's quite championship level, but he's a guy who, if you want to play for Quinn Snyder, you have to be able to play defense. You have to buy into what he wants to do. His offensive sets are fairly simple. I mean, they're very not too extravagant offensive team. They have great ball movement. It's kind of like I don't want to compare him to Popovich, obviously, but some of that stuff, kind of the Jazz basketball and Spurs basketball, are two of the very similar philosophies in the NBA right now. And I think that Quinn it's kind of a Jazz thing. Like, free agents don't want to go play in Utah. The casual NBA fan doesn't want to watch Utah. And I think that just because he's there, that he doesn't really get that kind of recognition for it.
Is he a disciple of Pop, like in terms of assistant coach, or was it Coach Bud that he's linked with before?
I'm actually not sure. I should have had the answer to that one.
Yeah, I think it was Coach Bud, because they do play very similar styles. Loads of ball movement and lots of switching on defense as well. So it wouldn't shock me. But yeah, no, I put him in my top 5 coach in the league. He's relatively young as well compared to some of the other coaches in the NBA. So I think if he sticks around, the Jazz are always going to be a playoff team, you know. And a lot of franchises don't get playoffs every single year. We kind of, if you support a team that are in the playoffs every year or very good every year, you know, if you're like a Lakers fan nowadays, for example, or a Chiefs fan in our example, you almost get like blinded, don't you, by the fact that not every team makes it to the playoffs. And if you've got Quinn Snyder as your coach, the Jazz have made the playoffs every single year, I think. So I think people kind of forget that. Well,
especially in a market like Utah, like obviously you have that salary cap and luxury tax that all teams have to deal with in basketball, but you're not getting the marquee free agents. Like when LeBron was a free agent, I saw Jazz fans who thought LeBron would actually even have a sit-down visit with Utah. I was like, there's literally no way that LeBron James is going to pack up his family and say, we're going to go live in Salt Lake City for 4 years or even 1 year. Like it's just not a destination that people want to go. And I want to go to Utah. I think it would be a beautiful place to visit for a little bit, but it's just one of those things that you have to kind of make do with what you have. And I think that Snyder gets the most out of the roster that he's been given.
Yeah, I agree. And a little tangent, actually, not a question I wrote down, but do you think having fans back in the stands for the playoff time will actually help the Jazz? Because their fan base is known as one of the most loudest and kind of rowdiest in the NBA, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Vivint is one of the cooler arenas in the league, and I think that the fans are so passionate and they have an exciting team that it definitely would be a huge, huge plus for them.
Okay, cool. Like we said earlier then, Jazz, best team in the West, best team in the league at the moment, however you look at it. But what would be a good season for the Jazz now that I guess expectations have risen to a lot higher than they would have been probably 3 months ago? But in your opinion, what is a good season? Is it a Western Conference Finals versus LeBron, or are they that good that they need to kind of come out of the West to be seen as a great season?
I think for me personally, I would be happy with a Western Conference Finals berth for sure. I mean, last year they were one bounce away from getting to the second round of the playoffs, and I think anything can happen from there. But now that they're healthy, they're playing as well as they can. I still don't think that this is a championship level team unless some team like Miami got there to the NBA Finals and then the Jazz somehow got there. That'd be an interesting matchup. But it's one of those things where like I trust Donovan Mitchell, but unless he goes like 37 points like he did in the first round last year, if he did that every playoff series and had a Dwayne Wade like 2005 level run, I'm not sure they're a championship level team. But if they can get to the West Finals, I'd be happy.
Yeah, and I think every year that goes on, someone like Donovan Mitchell is only learning, aren't they? I don't want to
Yeah.
compare him to Michael Jordan, but you saw the start of Michael Jordan's career with the playoff losses that he just said every single season. He just learned. He learned about playoff basketball, learned what he could do, what he couldn't do, how to score, etc. And I think that players like Luka, Donovan Mitchell, players like that, they're in that kind of next category where they need to be in as many playoff games as they can just to learn how to play playoff basketball.
Yeah, absolutely. And getting there is the first part of the battle. I think that
Yeah,
as long as you can get there and kind of learn some different things. And Donovan, like, he does really find different ways to improve. Like, you look at his numbers this season, and they're pretty consistent with what they have been. But then you tune into a Jazz game and you see him just making better reads. He's making better passes. He's filling his spots better. He's playing harder on defense. Him and Gobert seem to be really getting along better this season. So I think that if he can keep improving and hit that level in the playoffs and the rest of the guys keep playing like this, then there's an off chance that they could like take the Lakers to 6 games or something like that. But I still am not sure that they can go all the way. And that's okay. Like you said, a lot of teams can't even get to the playoffs. So for a team like
yeah.
them to be able to get there and maybe win a series or two is going to be a plus.
Yeah, that's what I've been most impressed with Donovan Mitchell this season. His passing's a lot better, out of double teams especially, and defensively as well. He seems to buy in even more. Like effort's never a problem with him, but you still have to learn how to play defense and
Yeah.
how to play it the right way. And for me, I don't know if that's Quinn Schneider or playing with Rudy Gobert, but I just think he looks much better on the defensive end, which is good to see.
Yeah, I think he's just fully embracing that. Really, with Mike Conley playing better, he's played off ball on offense, so I don't think he's quite as. There were some games last year where it didn't even matter if he was in tip top shape or not. He just got burned out down the stretch. And like you saw that in game 7 against Denver in the playoffs, where he looked visibly tired just from carrying the load every single possession. I think that in the playoffs when they're guarding a Jamal Murray, like he will embrace that. And the Jazz are missing a guy who can even slow down a Steph or a Dame or a Harden or anything like that. So if he can even try to, that would be a huge plus. And I think, like you said, the effort's never a problem with him. It's just that technique, and he's definitely better this season.
Yeah, well, numbers wise, one of the best defensive teams in the NBA. And I read
Yeah.
a good stat yesterday that I think Mike Conley plays 91% of his minutes with Rudy Gobert. So when they're on the floor, obviously, they're going to be good defensively. But Donovan Mitchell has only played 40% of his minutes with Rudy Gobert. So he's playing a lot of minutes with Favors and Jordan Clarkson, for example, and they're still buying in on defense and doing well. So I think that says a lot to Mitchell as a leader.
Yes, absolutely. He's a fantastic leader. And the like you said, another thing that he continues to get better at different things. Leadership is one of them. Like he is fully embracing. I think he's only 24, and
Yeah.
is just fully the face of that team, the heart and soul of them. Like Gobert may have a better impact in different aspects, and Conley, the analytics say Conley's a top 20 player this season, which everyone knows. Obviously, he hasn't been, but he's been a lot better. But Donovan Mitchell is just. I really don't have anything negative to say about that kid. He is fantastic.
Yeah, it's nice to see someone get supermax and play even harder than they played
Yeah.
before, which is what's happened to him. And Tatum as well, I know he's been injured, but similar sort of level. I just think that they'll go on strength for strength. And as a Mavs fan, unfortunately, I think that Mitchell could be a bit of a foil in Luka's side for years to come, I think, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's go on to the next question then. It's kind of awards based. Mitchell's been good, but he's not going to be in our MVP sort of race. So I had a couple of other questions for you. So Rudy Gobert, Defensive Player of the Year, favourite at the moment in the betting odds. Jordan Clarkson's favourite for the sixth man. I think Quinn Snyder's third favourite for Coach of the Year. What are your thoughts on those three and those awards? Do you think that they're going to be locks if the things carry on the way they are?
If things carry on the way they are, I think Snyder would end up getting that Coach of the Year award. I think that Clarkson right now, it's really a 2-man race with Boucher from Toronto, but I think Clarkson has like a huge lead.
Yeah.
You bring up guys like Lou Williams and stuff like that. I think that really it's Jordan Clarkson's award to lose as things stand. I mean, he's been remarkably efficient. He's averaging 18 a game. He had a 40 ball on
No.
Monday night against
That was
Philadelphia,
crazy.
and like
That was crazy.
in 29 minutes, like he was just going nuclear on them. But the Defensive Player of the Year one is something that I kind of flip flop on. Anthony Davis was in that. Now he's injured, so I don't think that completely disqualifies him, but he's going to miss a major chunk of the season. Miles Turner, he's averaging, I think it's like 3.5 blocks per game. Like he's been fantastic on defense. So you have him, Gobert, Embiid, and Simmons are both kind of slight candidates for it. You have Giannis, who's won it before. So if I had to put money on it right now, I would probably go with Miles Turner, I think.
Yeah.
But Gobert, I think, is right on his heels.
Yeah, see, for me, I think I would go with Ben Simmons, but the problem is the award never goes to a guard. I know he's not a traditional
Yeah.
guard, but you have to get like huge block numbers. If you look at the winner of the awards, like Rudy Gobert's won it before, obviously Giannis, they all get loads of blocks, whereas
Yeah.
Ben Simmons guards the point guard or the 2 or the 3, so it's difficult for him. So I think Gobert's probably favourite in terms of the betting, but yeah, I do like Miles Turner. They do like to give the award sometimes to people that have never won it before, I guess.
Well, man, and with Simmons, like that was peak Simmons against the Jazz. Like he was switching on defense, playing great ball. He had over 40 points. Like I believe that was a career high for him. He was aggressive. Like Ben Simmons gets hated on a lot because people want him to do guard stuff. But
Yeah.
really, he's just like a power forward, like hybrid post type player who can pass the heck out of the ball and switch 1 through 4, sometimes even 5. Like Ben Simmons is definitely a player who he's a candidate for that award. And I think like if Marcus Smart was healthy all season, he would be in talks for it. But I like to see good defense in the NBA now because a lot of players don't really try that much on that end. So I really appreciate the ones that do.
Yeah, definitely. And then going back to the Sixth Man of the Year award, Jordan Clarkson's contract was featured in our section of worst signings of the off season. So it's making me and Ben look very stupid of how good he's been. But I just can't believe how well he's shooting the ball in terms of efficiency. Like he's always been a good scorer. He can get 20 points off the bench, not easily, but compared to most players, relatively easily. But he's doing it now efficiently, and he's not a 0 on the defensive end as well, which helps.
Yeah, and that's Quinn Schneider. Like I said earlier, if you want to play for Quinn, you have to at least try on defense. Yeah. And Clarkson is like a perfect fit for them because they were missing a guy who could, like it was kind of Joe Ingles for a while, where he would come off and just shoot a ton of threes and try to score. Clarkson is a much more talented scorer than Joe Ingles is, and I mean the shots are falling. He's shooting pretty well above I think he's like a 35% shooter from deep for his career. He's 39 this season. So Royce O'Neal's another guy who's, like you said earlier, they have a ton of guys who are shooting just absolutely lights out from behind the arc. And I think that for the most part, it's probably going to stand throughout the rest of the season.
Yeah, I think as a team, it's 41% from the outside, which is that is so high. As a Mavs fan, I think we're shooting like 21%. So the difference is very stark. How crazy is it? We spent however many minutes now talking about the Jazz, and Joe Ingles has kind of only just been mentioned because he's almost like a fourth option on this team now, whereas a couple of years ago he was almost their star, I guess.
Yeah, and Ingles, he's a guy who, one of the several players who his impact goes well beyond the box score. I think that you can look at Joe Ingles and see he had 7 points and 3 assists, but then you watch the game and he really played a major role in it. I think he's an underrated player and has really been for a long time.
Yeah, he's a better defender, I think, than people give him credit for. And I don't know if that's just because of the way he looks and the kind of way he's perceived across the league, but he's a really good defender for someone of his kind of agility and athleticism-wise. Anyway.
Yeah, he's a guy who, like, you would think he'd come to the local gym and you would start laughing that he wanted to come play and, like, ball up, and then he would drop 50 points and just clamp everyone on defense. Like, Joe Ingles, he's a very, very funny player. And he's a funny guy too. He's one of the treasures of the NBA for sure.
Yeah, he talks a lot of trash as well, apparently, which I find hilarious. Yep. I like watching those mic'd up clips. He's pretty good on there. Cool. Well, the last question then. This is the same question I've asked every guest for every team really that we've had, because we've only had playoff teams so far. How many All-Star players will the Jazz have this year, and who do you think they are?
I think it's 2. People bring up Mike Conley, and really there's just too many guards in the West. That's been the thing with him his entire career. Like there's Steph, there's Dame, there's Mitchell, Luka, Chris Paul, Devin Booker, Gilgeous-Alexander. Like there are just way too many good guards, and Mike Conley's a good player, but he's not one of those guys. And you look at Mitchell and Gobert, I think both of them are, I'd say, firmly all-stars this year. Like I don't have to think really hard about that. I think that Gobert's overall impact makes him a candidate, and he's back in those talks for Defensive Player of the Year. And then Mitchell, just the team success and people watching him and seeing his growth. So I think I'm going to go with 2.
Yeah, I feel bad for Mike Conley because even with the Grizzlies years, he's never made an All-Star team, is it? It's him and CJ McCollum, I think, they're the two probably best players to never make an All-Star team. And they arguably won't make another team this year, which I think it sucks. But the West is just loaded. The only way to get that is to go to the East. And he'd probably have 6 All-Star appearances, I think, if he played in the East.
Yeah, he's an underrated. Like when we look back at his career, people are going to think that he wasn't as good as he really is, and that's because he doesn't have those type of accolades.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, last question then on the All-Star. Like I said in the last episode, me and Ben did our All-Star starters. And again, Ben kind of threw a guard out there. He had Mitchell starting over Lillard and Luka due to the success of the season and how good the team's been and the Mavs record as well. And the Blazers obviously a lot better than the Mavs. But what are your thoughts? Is there any chance that he starts in the All-Star game, or you think him and Gobert will both be reserves?
Yeah, no way. They're both reserves. I mean, it's Steph and Luka are Steph and Luka. Like, you don't really have to say too much about them. And I think that I'd probably have Dame and Donovan as the 2 backup guards, and then it'd be like probably LeBron, Kawhi, I guess, and then Jokic as the forwards, and then I guess you would have Gobert, Davis, and PG as those reserves.
Yeah, well, you basically named that's the exact team that I had, basically. There. So, yeah, great minds think alike. Cool. Well, thanks, Jordan. Thanks for coming on. It's good to learn a little bit more about the Jazz and talk about a few topics maybe that people over here don't hear very often.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me on. That was awesome.
So everyone, in terms of the rest of the podcast, me and Ben will be back this weekend to review the last week in the NBA and talk about the games for the coming week. But Jordan, could you just shout out your Twitter handle or anywhere that guys can go and read any of the stuff you put out?
Yeah, find me on pretty much everything: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at Footnoted, FOOTENOTED. I try to have a well-balanced diet of football, baseball, basketball, but right now it's a lot of Chiefs and a lot of Jazz.
Cool. Well, thanks again for coming on, and we'll speak to you soon, guys.
Yep.